Also, Raj Kumar, founder, CEO of Devex. Thank you so much for joining us here. I think maybe I'd start by asking, so why is it important for you to be here at the Paris Peace Forum spring meeting?
Well, I'm thrilled to be here, first of all. And it's a little bit to me of like a tale of two cities. I don't mean Paris and Marrakesh, even though we're a little bit outside of Marrakesh for an event that's called the Paris Peace Forum, which I know might make people think for a second. I understand it's the first time this forum has held its spring meetings outside of Paris and here in Africa.
Yeah.
So it's quite an important moment, I think, for the forum, which is itself become a really critical component of the global picture when you think about the issues we cover at Devex. The Paris Peace Forum has taken on a larger and larger role over the years. We're thrilled to be a part of it and associated with it. I think this year's session focused on this idea of just transitions is particularly important. And it's important because of this tale of two cities. You've got the political picture, and we're speaking just after the elections, European parliamentary elections that were yesterday, and where we heard the French government, for example, calling for snap elections. So a political picture that, if you are a supporter of global cooperation, doesn't look very good. And on the other hand, here we are in this other city, quote unquote, on a campus that is innovative and high tech and bringing African students from around the continent together to think about a new approach to development and cooperation here in Africa and around the world. So it is a tale of two cities in a sense, and I think this forum maybe captures a bit of that. And it's a lot of what we try to capture at Devex, that sometimes the political winds, the development finance winds may not be blowing in our direction, but there is a lot of good that's happening under the surface, a lot of innovation among practitioners and social enterprises that I think give us a way forward.
You've written about some of that in your most recent book. Maybe it'd be interesting, you've talked to a lot of people over the years in development, cooperation, global governance. What are some of the examples that most spring to mind, most interesting ways that people are transforming this field of global cooperation?
Well, a lot of it is sort of what you glimpse when you're walking around this campus and you see laboratories and young people who are thinking up the latest in ag tech or where the critical mineral transition will go. That's a lot of what I think is really exciting. So, there's a conversation happening among governments now about how do you get more of the development cooperation finance to the level where people are actually doing the work in the communities where they live. Right? There's a lot that gets captured at the top. And figuring out how do you develop a more market-based system. And there are great examples of that, and it's often where you find social entrepreneurs. They might be running for-profits or nonprofits, they might be inside government, but they're doing something new and innovative that's driving change. And I've already just been here less than a day, and I've already heard a number of examples of these kinds of activities that are going on, including someone yesterday talking to me about a renewable agriculture initiative that's reached 1 million farmers in India. There are just a number of these things that are happening around the world under the surface. As much as the political discussion is a real challenge, I think there's a way of thinking that has changed in the development sector that is more about market-based solutions, that's more about community-led, locally led approaches, and that really changes the tenor of what we do and the way we think from sort of a project and grant and contract focused industry to one that's much more about grassroots bubbling up with the very best ideas and innovations.
With that in mind, obviously we're focusing on fair transitions today, and that's a broad concept. Some of the themes being environment, critical transition minerals, nutrition. In your long experience in the field of development, what aspects, if you had to pick, I hate the term silver bullet, but if you had to pick a silver bullet, what would be the most important lever right now?
Well, you mentioned critical minerals, and as you say, there is no silver bullet. But it's probably the most attractive now to many people who are looking at this space. And one of the reasons is you don't get a climate transition without an energy transition, and you don't get that without critical minerals. There's simply no way forward, right? The world is talking about AI now. It's taking over everything, and for good reason in a lot of ways, but you don't get AI if you don't have critical minerals, right? These are the minerals that are in our phones, that are in our computers, that are in our solar panels. So, in fact, it's funny you say silver bullet, given how much silver is in solar panels, right? So, this is really a transition that will happen, and it just so happens that a very large percentage of critical minerals are here on the continent of Africa, where we're sitting today. So, you can say, well, this is potentially a problem. You have many countries, I think of the DRC, so rich in these natural resources, and yet you see something like 120 armed groups fighting each other there, in part over those resources. So it's not to suggest, hey, this is an easy thing, but the fact that there is a massive growing market demand for those minerals creates an opportunity. Yep. And if organizations like the Paris Peace Forum can help create the kind of governance structures that will be needed, the kind of enabling environments that let the private sector engage with international norms and organizations to get those minerals out of the ground in a way that actually helps local people where those minerals are, haven't always achieved that. So I don't want to suggest that's easy, but it is an opportunity.
Yeah. So I think that brings us to a nice additional aspect, which is really that governance side of things. How do you... It's always difficult to find governance models that work for North and South, for local communities. Have there been any interesting models that you've either seen here or come across in recent years that have particularly inspired you, that maybe could be at least an inspiration for future political initiatives on whether it's minerals, whether it's health, whether it's any of those other massive areas?
Yeah, I think the model of global governance that's kind of worked the best in the last couple of decades is this idea of the public-private alliance, right? Gavi and the Global Fund in Health, as you know, are examples, but there are many, many others now that span all different sectors. Yeah. And they're particularly valuable at a moment when you have a lot of distrust between North and South. You have a geopolitical conflict, right, between the West and China and Russia. It's not easy to get 200 countries together at a UN level to agree on anything. Yeah. The public-private alliance gives you a way forward because you pick a specific issue, you get a coalition of the willing around that issue, you allow governments, North and South, but also private sector and civil society to be a key part of the table and the governance structure. Yeah. And you try to move forward in something that's sort of fit for purpose, right? You're not going to agree on everything, but maybe you can agree on nutrition. Yeah. And that's, for example, a reason why the Nutrition for Growth Summit, which Paris is hosting next summer, and which is going to be talked about here, and in fact, the Paris Peace Forum is putting together this expert group. That's a great example, I think, where you can pick an issue, create a global convening around it, pick a moment that creates some urgency, get the right coalition, and actually, even under very difficult political circumstances, drive some kind of change. It may not be as much change as the world needs or as we want, but I think that is, as messy as it is, probably the most interesting, exciting, and potential opportunity that we have now in global governance.
What I'm hearing is a lot of optimism, despite the political trends that you've mentioned, whether on this side of the Atlantic or the other side of the Atlantic. Would you say that you're optimistic about the next 5, 10, 20 years when it comes to bridging that north-south gap and also, indeed, the east-west gap?
I don't think we have much choice but to be optimistic when you work on these kinds of issues, right? It's very easy to fall into maybe the trap of thinking, looking at the headlines, nothing is going right. But part of what we try to do at Devex in our coverage is to look a little bit beyond those immediate headlines and talk about what are the real implications and what's happening around the world, not just in Paris or in Washington, D.C., but around the world. And one thing you find when you come to Africa and you talk to people who are on the front lines of these issues is a sense of optimism. Yeah. Far more than you'll find in global north capitals. And I think it's because, just like at campuses like this, there are people who are actually working. They don't have time to think about the political headwinds. They're there. Yeah. But they have to work to make a change in their own community, in their own society, and they see the opportunity. So I don't want to suggest we should be hopelessly, optimistic about everything. We need to be realistic too, and there are some huge hurdles in front of us. But hopefully there's a sense that we can't just be constrained by these political realities. We have to work through them anyway.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much. Any final thoughts that you wanted to share with us before we go?
Just how impressed I am to be at this campus. UM6P, my first time here, and it is an amazing facility. it's incredible and inspirational to see all the young people and what's happening here. And so it's a real honor to get to be a part of this and a part of the Paris Peace Forum.
Well, thank you so much, Raj Kumar, for joining us. And you can follow this and all of our other interviews with our great attendees on our social media, on YouTube, on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook. And feel free to also sign up for our email newsletter on our website. Thanks.